All right, good afternoon. My name is Carla Nugent. I am the Chief Revenue Officer for Low & Bro. We are a multi-craft industrial and commercial contractor in the construction space, and we serve different markets, primarily across the western half of the United States. I also serve as the chair for the Colorado Business Roundtable. I'm very excited to tee up our next segment that will be on purpose and performance. For those of you that know me, I'm very passionate about workforce development, culture, engagement, how our employees' career path, when they flourish, their families are healthy, they have opportunities, our communities flourish. It's just a full circle life cycle. And so it's important for us to talk about this today. The Gallup data has not been super encouraging, I think, over some of the past reports on engagement. It shows engagement is low on the employee side. Like half of our employees are there for a paycheck. And so those leaders, right, we're passionate on that heart piece. I want to work in a place that has full engagement. Employees want to be in a place. When that energy and that engagement is real, it's this connective piece that you can't quite explain, but it's so powerful. And we spend so many hours at work, like let's make this a place for good and a force for good, as we say, for Colorado Business Roundtable. And so I'm excited for Gallup to share their newest data on purpose. It shows that we're moving the needle on engagement in a positive direction significantly by understanding purpose. So help me join and welcome Justin Lall, who's principal for Gallup. He leads the U.S. social sector research focused on democracy, economic mobility, and community well-being. He directs large-scale custom studies for foundations, governments, and nonprofits, leveraging rigorous multimodal research to capture lived experience and inform policy, philanthropy, and systemic change. That's a heavy lift, Justin. So please join me. Welcome Justin here to Colorado and share on purpose and performance. Justin?
Thank you, Carla, for that great introduction, and thank you for the Business Roundtable for hosting this important meeting here today. As Carla mentioned, my name is Justin Lall. I'm a principal with Gallup. I'm based in our Chicago office, and I oversee a number of different initiatives. And for those of you that might not be familiar with Gallup overall, we're a survey research company that collects a lot of data. We spend a lot of our time looking at data, and it looks a lot like what we're seeing. Actually, this is a real image from what has been on our data analysts' screens over the past couple of months here. And so if you were to walk through the halls of Gallup at any given point, there's a very high likelihood that you would see this exact screen or something that looked like it on a number of our analysts' computers. Now, to deal with something like this, we actually just hired a group of new data analysts, interns, and in the Chicago office, they kind of sit next to each other in this row. And so I was introducing myself to them, and I walked up to the first one. I said, "Hi, I'm Justin. What do you do here?" And I looked on the screen, and it looked just like this. And the new intern looked at me and said, "I'm a data analyst. Can't you see?" And I said, "Great." So I walked over to the next cube, and I said, "Hi, my name's Justin. What do you do here?" And her screen looked just like this one too. And she said, "Well, I'm working on this client problem. It's really tough, but I'm trying to find a counterintuitive point that can kind of get their goal across the field here. So I'm validating something interesting, but I'm working really hard on it." And I said, "Okay, great." And keep in mind, these two individuals have the exact same job title. They sit right next to each other. Their screens look the same. I go to the third individual, and I say, "Hi, my name's Justin. What do you do around here?" And she looked up at me and she kind of paused. I saw the crosstabs and Excel formulas on her screen. And she goes, "I help people be heard." Okay. Data analyst, solve client problems, help people be heard. So what do you get from this? Well, this idea of connecting individual tasks and individual activities to long-term impact or unforeseen impact is an idea and a concept that we call purpose. And this purpose at work is something that's actually been studied by a number of organizations, Gallup included, for the past 40 years. We actually, skipped a little ahead here. We actually went through and explored how organizations were dealing with purpose in the workplace. And in the 1990s, we pioneered this construct called employee engagement in over 160 countries and over 7,000 organizations. And what we found was that there's 12 elements of employee engagement that actually lead to real hard outcomes. And those outcomes were things like profitability, productivity, better attendance, less absenteeism, less turnover, and overall improvements in employee well-being. So the key takeaway from some of our early work in the 1990s, that things like employee engagement are not nice to haves. These are not soft metrics. These are things that are very hard and tangible and related to key business outcomes that everyone in the organization care about, CFOs especially included here. And so through those elements, those 12 elements I shared, one of those elements that we measured was called purpose. And what we were looking at from that work was at the organizational level, how do we think about purpose? And does an organization have a mission or a purpose that employees feel is important? And what we found from some of this foundational research was that the more employees thought that that purpose made them feel important, the more likely they were to be productive at work, more likely that organization was to be profitable, less likely to have absenteeism, and a whole host of other incomes. And so we've known this for a while, but that was all at the organizational level. So what we wanted to do next was dive a little bit deeper. And so in partnership with Stand Together, we went really deep into the individual level and wanted to understand both from a work and a life perspective, how do individuals experience purpose? And so we conducted this study called The Power of Purpose. And what we learned was that when individuals have a strong sense of purpose, the outcomes then follow. We found that individuals that had a strong sense of purpose were 5 times more likely to be engaged in their work. That is a massive, massive multiplier here. That engagement and work metric, that's connected to all those outcomes that I shared earlier, those things like productivity, profitability in the workplace. Individuals that had a high sense of purpose were also much less likely to report feeling burnt out or stressed in the workplace. They're also much less likely to report looking for other jobs actively while they were on their job here. And so we found, and here's what these data look like in a little bit more detail, we found that individuals, when they have a high sense of purpose at the individual level, are much more likely to have these outcomes that matter. And they're less likely to feel burnt out and stressed. And I'll come back to that here, but I want to flag that for you all, because when we're thinking about drivers of turnover, things like looking for a job, things like feeling burnt out or overly stressed, sometimes or all the time, we find that purpose is a very strong mitigating factor to those types of things. And so we know that purpose is connected to outcomes that matter. But then the question becomes, who has purpose? Who are those individuals at the organization that have a strong sense of purpose? And I want you all to think about this for a second. You just take a moment, think about your own organizations. Are there teams, are there individuals, are there organizations that come to mind that you think that's a group that has a strong sense of purpose? Everyone got someone in mind or a group in mind? Well, here's what we found. We found that leaders in an organization were the most likely to have a strong sense of purpose. Now, this might be surprising, this might be obvious to everyone in this room, but the reason I bring this up here at this point is as you're thinking about these data, don't think about yourselves. You all are outliers. You all are not the norm here. Your teams, your workplaces, your employees, that's the norm. Particularly look at the individual contributor level and take a look at the project manager level. We find that only 1 in 5 of those middle managers, those project managers, have a high sense of purpose. It's about half the rate of leaders. And so the individuals in this room are not indicative of the rest of the workplace. And what we find is those individuals that have the lowest sense of purpose are the most likely to need it. And here's what I mean by that. When you take a look at where people are at on baseline, this is at the generation cut level, where people are at on baseline. The individuals that are least likely to have purpose, in this case, young people, 18 to 34-year-olds, Gen Z and younger millennials, are the most likely to report needing it by way of burnout and stress and actively looking for jobs. Here's what we found in our data when it comes to individuals reporting feeling stressed or burned out in work. We find that young people specifically are significantly more likely, just at baseline, to have more levels of stress and burnout at work. And what we found earlier was that purpose is a driver or a mitigating factor of reducing levels of stress and burnout, and those individuals, the young people, are least likely to have purpose. Same thing when it came to looking at overall trends about job seeking behavior while at the workplace. We found that individuals that were in that younger age cohort, specifically those 18 to 34-year-olds, were most likely to be seeking other employment while on the job actively. And also we found that purpose is the mitigating factor that stops or kind of mitigates that behavior overall. And so, as I mentioned, we were more interested in purpose at the individual level. We understand that purpose comes from multiple sources. And we were also trying to explore what happens when someone has a sense of purpose outside of work. We are multidimensional individuals. Not everyone's going to go to work and say, I'm 100% filled up. And that's okay. We wanted to see what is that do to the workplace. And what we found is that individuals that have a strong sense of purpose in life have some spillover effects when it comes to their engagement in work. But the best scenario is when people can find that their life purpose and their work purpose are connected. So that alignment here, when you have people that have a strong sense of purpose in life and that is empowered or enabled by their purpose in work, that's where you see the most additive benefits. What we find is those individuals are most likely to be thriving in what's called well-being. We use what's called the self-anchoring scale, which is the same measure we use on the World Happiness Report for the United Nations. So it's a well-validated measure. We find that over 6 in 10 Americans that have high purpose in life and work are thriving in their overall well-being. So really important impacts there. Here's a look at what we found as it relates to at the individual level here. Again, while this is, I'll say, the goal to strive for, that connectivity point, it's only about 1 in 5 individuals that have that. So quite a bit of ways to go when we think about how are we enabling purpose for individuals outside of work here. But one of the things that we found is that when individuals are asked about the type of work that they're seeking, most Americans today do not have jobs that they would consider purposeful. Over 4 in 10 Americans go to work every day and they say that they're here to collect a paycheck. But that's not the desired state. When you ask Americans what they really want out of work, that's where you get into what's the aspirational type of work that you want, and they find that they want purposeful work. So while current state, the most popular response option for how I would evaluate my job today is about a paycheck. It's about paycheck and benefits. It's not what we would want in the ideal state. People do want a job that allows them to connect their work to something more meaningful. And so last slide I'll share here on findings, and I'll share just a couple quick recommendations, is we asked Americans, what do they want when it comes to the overall experience? What would drive purpose for them in the workplace? And there's 2 answers that bubbled for the top. One was helping them see the connection between the type of work they were doing and that overall impact. So that theme of what is the job I'm doing and how does that connect overall to some bigger picture outcomes? 2 is having enough work-life balance potentially to pursue purposes outside of work. And as we saw in some of the data, that does have spillover effects as if it is enabled properly here. And so we asked Americans specifically, what do you want? It's the ability to have work-life balance to pursue purpose outside of work, but also to see the contribution and how it connects overall, making that very evident and very clear. So what can we do with this? What are the ways that we can get deeper into how we can serve employers when it comes to purpose? Well, one of the first things we can do is make work more purposeful. Well, what does that mean? Well, we have to show our teams how their work directly connects to the bigger picture outcomes. And it seems easy enough, right? But 4 in 5 managers aren't doing that today. Only 1 in 5 managers are doing a good enough job where their employees say that they're connecting the work they're doing to the overall mission and values of the organization. So there's quite a bit of opportunity for improvement here when it comes to how managers are connecting with their employees overall. The second thing we can do is connect that work to something that is of importance to the individual. And again, this might sound obvious on its surface, but it is seemingly difficult. And here's what I mean by that. If I need to connect my team's work to their individual sense of purpose, I need to know what that individual sense of purpose is. That means I need to have real conversations with them. I need to have tough conversations with them. And I need to extrapolate something beyond just the surface level here. What we find is that when individuals feel that they can do what they do best every day, they're almost 3 times as likely to have a strong sense of purpose. But again, what's the implication here? That our managers know what we do best every single day. So we need to get there by having real conversation and hard conversations with our teams to understand what drives them, what motivates them, what gets in their way beyond just tactical, what demoralizes them. And having a better understanding and having some of those deeper and tougher conversations does help us to unearth what drives an individual and how we can kind of get there for the long term. The further thing we can do is be cognizant that there's more than one path to purpose, and we can support all of them. As I shared before, there are spillover effects. When we have our bucket full from our life purpose, we do see an increase overall in employee engagement. So how we can get there is by understanding that people are multidimensional, and if there's flexibility that's enabled, sometimes that can lead to a better sense of purpose overall here. So what can we do? Well, we can make the mission matter. We can show people that we care, not just talk about it. People can see through a mission statement on a poster. They need to have the authenticity there. We need to understand that people are human and understand that there's more than one path to purpose, and get to know that the individual beyond just the job title. All those things done when managers are coached appropriately will lead to better senses of purpose overall. And I won't be your first QR code. I'm probably not your last QR code for today, but if you want the full report here, it'll be available at the QR code behind me. Well, thank you all for your time. And next, I'd like to introduce Lee Wheeler-Berliner. Lee is the Managing Director of the Colorado Workforce Development Council, where he leads the execution of strategies to deploy and sustain industry-led talent development systems across Colorado. Please join me in welcoming Lee to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Lee Wheeler-Berliner. I get to lead the Colorado Workforce Development Council, and I now here in that presentation feel honored to be part of that 20% that can stand here and say that I'm in a role that is directly connected to my personal purpose and in a way that allows me to thrive. Joe, thank you for creating that environment in which people can show up within state governments in a way that is leaning into values that matter. And the reason why I get to say that is that the purpose that our organization has is ultimately to serve you as Coloradans, as businesses, as employers in the state of Colorado, as individuals who are seeking to thrive within this community and within this state. The vision of the Workforce Development Council is that every Colorado employer has access to skilled talent and that every Coloradan has the opportunity for meaningful employment. And we know that when that is realized, that helps to create both individual and statewide economic prosperity. When we think about the work, as Justin just said, to drive engagement, you need to get to do a little bit of what you do best each and every day. And you need to know what it is that you do best. That's part of why we believe that the future of work is skills-based, is understanding what are the fundamental skills, capabilities, and competencies that you have as an individual, that your team has, that your industry needs in order to thrive. The importance of skills can be described by the story that a parent shared recently, where the kids were kind of driving the parent a little nuts and said, can we do one of those escape rooms? So the parent said, I put the kids in the basement with a television that had no remote control, a rotary telephone, and I gave them directions for how to use those things written in cursive. It's been 7 hours, I haven't seen them yet. We know that skills evolve. Technology changes, skills grow, we have to adapt. And while our workplaces adapt, we're gonna see this dynamic within our workforce in which younger generations have skills our older workforce may be in need of. Our older workforce has skills that our younger generation needs to understand and connect. For you to maintain your retention, your growth, to drive the economy forward in the state of Colorado, it's important that as employers and businesses, you have access to support, to understand what is going on within your workforce, to understand how you can help to develop and upskill your employees. That's where the work that we do comes into play. As an intermediary, as part of state government, we get to help drive this growth. We exist within a talent development structure that is designed to support businesses and job seekers and to make that supply and demand equation for talent work. At a local level, those efforts are led each day by Workforce Colorado, which is a network of 10 local workforce areas with more than 50 locations statewide, all working together to empower individuals, support businesses, and strengthen communities. We have leadership from Workforce Colorado here with us today. Our organization also gets to work across multiple disciplines and multiple state agencies, and leaders guiding economic development, education, and labor and employment are here with us today as well. I encourage each of you to commit to at least one action from what you hear today, and think about how you can build one new partnership with someone in this room. Because the strategy that you execute on tomorrow will only be as good as the data that you rely on today. And to continue our journey into the data that is shaping your actions, right now I'm pleased to introduce Eyal Darman. Eyal leads Accenture's advanced AI team for public sector and higher education. He partners with public service and higher education organizations to turn emerging innovations into practical solutions, using AI not just as a tool for innovation, but as a lever for meaningful impact on people's lives. Please welcome Eyal to the stage for a briefing on Colorado Business Roundtable's 2025 Workforce Survey.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to walk around a little bit. See if this works afterward. Perfect. My name is Eyal Darman. I lead Accenture's public service AI practice, and we've got about 500 or so practitioners that support organizations like yourselves in really rethinking how we do the work we do. And the research that we've collaborated with the Colorado Business Roundtable is an interesting one this year. Our combined team helped design the survey, analyze the data, and really shape the insights that you're about to see. And in the attempt to eat our own dog food, or as I like to say, drink our own champagne, we used a lot of AI in thinking and analyzing this data. The message back is not just loud, it's clear, and frankly, it's urgent. Colorado's employees are not waiting for the future of work to arrive. They're retooling how they hire, where they invest, and how they partner with organizations. And they're moving faster than ever before. The real question that this room has to grapple with and wrestle with today is whether the rest of the ecosystem, policymakers, education, workforce development, frankly, all of us, how can we all keep up with that pace? We've got a handful of insights from the research, from this year's research. Some will validate how you probably feel already today, and a few might surprise you. So let's get to it. I'm going to switch to the mic. There we go. So the first area is about the landscape and how the landscape has shifted. Just last year when we sat here and talked about how the landscape is really shifting, we talked about how really there's a labor shortage of some sort. That number this year has been halved. Only 40% of you think that labor shortage is currently a problem that we have. And frankly, that's justified with the data that was shared earlier. Eric shared information around how college graduates are at a point where they are finding less employment than they were in prior years, and it's not getting any better. Here's what is interesting, though. The data this year tells us that economic uncertainty is a real concern. Now, that economic uncertainty is probably multidimensional. It could be because the evolution of AI is really changing the way that each of us does what we do. It could also be that just overall national economic uncertainty, wars, and other things are disrupting our businesses in one way, shape, or form. So there's more a little bit about that. And you see some of the other ones are staying the same. They're not moving in any significant way. I thought one of the key statistics that was interesting is that 60% of employers say that housing affordability is the top Colorado workforce trend, right? That's an important part, and really, it's the so what for us here is the fact that housing is a workforce strategy. It doesn't matter what training we give our employees. If they can't find affordable housing, it will be offset. So that's our first trend for the year. Our second trend is around durable skills. And this one is a personal one for me because I've seen it firsthand. At Accenture, we used to hire people that have a specific degree or a specific skill set. We can train people in those skills over time, yes. But AI has really shifted that. I think I sat on these couches last year and told you that you should think of AI as having 1,000 interns supporting you. Today, it's 1,000 PhD students that can go down to a level of capability that we've never fathomed before. And it's not slowing down. So really, the digital or information economy is shifting. It's shifting to be a relationship economy. Think of the soft skills that people have and how you can differentiate yourself. I used to say I can differentiate myself with maybe the specific technical skill that I have. But I would challenge that now. I would tell you that your relationship skills, your durable skills that you see here today, are the ones that I think will make or break people's success. Because anyone can do the technology. Anyone can do those various things that historically were more niche and now can become more of a commodity. And that's a big shift. And as we talked about in some of the prior presenters, we need better skills in that space. And we need to all think of those durable skills across the board. Because that's going to make the difference between a successful organization, a successful person, and as the Gallup survey says, someone who's happy at work and enjoying what they do. And the data supports every single one of those. So it's not a one-off. It's a consistent pattern that we're seeing. And durable skills are ones that are going to be harder to acquire because as a parent of an 8-year-old, she seems to be really entertained by her iPad. And she would like to play on her iPad or use her iPad for various things more than others. That does not build durable skills. Don't let anyone convince you that it does. So we got to think about how do we actually change what we do and how we do. I loved your description around how do I take and put my kid in the basement and see if they can get out of the basement. That seems like that could be some other problems that you create. Those are good examples of how do you create some durable skills within your organizations. If we shift to our third insight, it is about AI. There's some staggering statistics here that are a little disturbing. Again, as someone who spends all day, every day in the AI space, eat, drink, all of it, all the time, we're still in, everyone wants it, everyone thinks it's going to make a big difference, but a very small percentage of enterprises are using it at scale. Most people are still in pilot mode, and we're seeing that improve and increment on a regular basis. But that being said, it's not as fast as people are expecting it to be. The promise of AI is really big, but I could tell you that in very few organizations has it actually materialized. I look at Accenture's organization. We've fundamentally changed how we do the work we do using AI. Not just in how we do our work, but what we deliver to our clients. And that's a noticeable difference in what I would say, I would tell you, not maybe a year or two ago, that's changing at the speed of technology. Every couple months, there's something new and different that changes the way we do the work we do. The scaling of this is going to make the difference. And as we see organizations scale, it goes back to that prior insight of durable skills, having critical thinking abilities, having the ability to have social and interaction conversations with other people that will make the difference. And then our last insights, the last two that we combine together, employers want faster, simpler, and measurable partnerships. Think about, as an employer, our employers have said that 80% of them want talent within 120 days of identifying the need. They want talent training. They want that skill set to be completed. They don't have 3 years, 2 years, a year. They don't have the speed that they used to have. And so organizations and partnerships, like apprenticeships, make a big difference because you can have and give the ability to get those resources skilled at a faster pace. And I think that's an important thing for us to think about. How do we keep at that pace? Because if we can keep at that pace or beat it, as Colorado, we will bring in and attract more talent, more employers, and it will improve incrementally everything. And so that's a key thing for us as a takeaway. I think if you think about all the insights combined, I'm going to read you that bottom sentence there. We're going to accelerate skills-based hiring. We need to treat housing affordability as a workforce strategy. Doesn't sound like it's a workforce strategy, but it is. We need to help our employers move from an AI pilot or a prototype into true enterprise AI in production. And we want to make sure that we're building those partnerships so that we can actually build those skills within our workforce at the speed that the workforce needs them.